All right, Math Moment Maker friends, we've got a topic here. It comes up quite often, but actually I've got it word for word. Someone had reached out to us. They said open-ended tasks in their classroom. They feel chaotic and they're hard to manage. It's noisy. It's such a shift from what I always thought good classroom management looks like. This particular educator has a pebble, and I'm sure we've all experienced it. And, before we hit record, John, Beth, we were chatting about how, when we started making this transition, it's actually a very much harder and easier said than done to actually shift away from that, organize the rows and, everything's in rows and all the kids have their hands neatly on their desk and everyone's looking in one direction and it's quiet and I'm in control. So many things going on here. Let's dig into this one. It's not the first time we've talked about this on the show, but I think it's really important for us to get back because these are challenging problems. And sometimes, having a few strategies on how we can shift a little bit of that control and maybe shift a little bit of that classroom environment from more of that traditional, organized, quiet sort of room into a room that's bustling with activity and learning going on. It can be a tough one. So let's unpack it here. Beth, start us off, remind us of your experience when you were sort of making that change. Because I think we can all be honest here and say, we probably all had a time or a period in our education journey where we did it the traditional way. We thought that was the way to go. So how did you make the shift? And what are some maybe ideas that people might consider as they try to make that shift?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of classroom management it's personal, it's individual. Some teachers can tolerate a lot more noise in the classroom and conversation than others just sort of naturally. And so I think I was one of those that I could handle the conversation, the noise, as long as it was on task, as long as students were engaged, right? But then, when it came time to bring them all back, I had some plan. I had a plan in place to get them all back. And so what I want to share though, Kyle, is so I worked with a school that was very much like what you described. 30 students in a classroom, students in rows, hands neatly on desks, scholar position. Everyone would be quiet within like 2 seconds. They would have complete command over that classroom. And the teachers were afraid to let go of that control, to even let them play a math game in class. And one of the things that I had to remind them of is you have incredibly strong classroom management structures in the classroom. If you can get 30 students with their hands on their desks and their eyes on you within 1 second of saying something, you don't have to worry about trying to bring them back together if you let them talk.
Right.
So don't be afraid of that. You've got this structure in place. Now leverage it, right? You've worked so hard getting them to that point. Now release some of that. Let them turn and talk because you'll be able to get them right back. You've proven time and time and time again. And so I think teachers need to know that that's there. They need to feel that confidence that they're not going to lose control. The kids aren't going to run chaotically down the class, out of the classroom and into the hallway.
Yeah.
They've got something in place already that's going to take care of that.
I think for me, when I first, started to transition, is like one of the big questions I had about this, because I used to say this, it's just chaos in that room over there. You walk by a room and you knew when you saw chaos in a room. So you're worried that someone's going to walk by and see chaos in your room. But I think for me, it wasn't that risk. I think the risk is but they're not going to learn as well unless I teach them. And I think that right there is sometimes the crux of what we're feeling. It's I could let them turn and talk. I could let them do this. I could pull them back when I need to because my classroom management is decent. But why would I want to do that if I fundamentally believe that they would learn by me just teaching them what they need to be learned, what they need to teach today?
Yeah, I'm seeing both of these things as major challenges that I had, and I would say definitely was concerned about control and losing control. So I think, Beth, your suggestion there, this idea that it's hey, listen, you've got it under control, so you will be able to bring it back to here. we get very irrational in our minds sometimes when we play things out, right? And we always think about the worst case scenario. So that's one. And then John, your piece here, and I think 100%, so many of us are like, well, if I don't say it in exactly this way, and, I don't want to get anyone confused. I don't want anyone to, be left behind. Like, all of these things are so key. And I want to give like a little thought for everyone. And I'm going to have to find I can't recall the author offhand. He is on our book list. So we're going to have to dig it up and put it in the show notes. But there is some research that basically had said, like, the amount of information that humans in general, not just kids, like we're talking adults, as soon as the group size gets beyond 6 people stop thinking the message is for them. Mm-hmm. Like, they essentially become, and we've heard Peter Lillehall talk about, being, being anonymous, right? And it's this idea that, like, there's so many people in this room. There's 30 of us in here. It's like, yeah, this isn't for me. Like, but the problem is, like, everybody thinks that. And that's a huge, huge issue. So that in many ways, it's like the risk of, and I think I noticed this when I actually started looking at, the actual retention of what students were taking with them from my lessons and how low that retention was anyway. I started to realize that, the risk, like, what am I really risking here? If I don't talk for 45 minutes straight and kids walk away with about the same as what they were going to walk away with anyway, which wasn't a whole lot, it's like the risk is actually pretty low here. So there's a lot of things here that oftentimes we think things are a way, and then we assume that if we do anything different, that everything's going to fall apart. But if we actually take inventory as to what's working well and maybe what's not working well, because many times the things that we're doing is like, it's actually not that great. Like, it's, we're not getting great results from what we're seeing anyway. Sometimes that can kind of reduce maybe the stress or the anxiety that's related to making some of these changes. Hey, you never know. You might actually get in a position where you actually see some improvement, like I did when I was talking for 45 minutes, but through small group, students talking and turning and talking, there was actually more for them to take away in less amount of time, with a little bit more noise, with maybe the potential for a little more chaos, but like, you were actually saving time by not just talking aimlessly and hoping that everybody was listening, when we, see from research that actually that's not a super efficient way to go about it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and you're right, because it's like, I think when I had that mentality of like, I could do it better, I was focusing on the wrong things, and mostly because I hadn't had the experience where I learned something of value in that type of environment. And when you have that shift, like when you have the epiphany, and we're like, that lesson that I just experienced seemed chaotic, but it was clear that it wasn't chaotic, and I learned. And I internalized the learning, I think, deeper than if someone just told it to me. Like, when you have that epiphany yourself, you're like, I want that. I want to create that for my students as well. And sometimes you don't see the bigger picture. You don't see I could do this lots of different places. You see it in that one specific content area, or you see it in that one specific lesson. You think, oh, that lesson was great because it did this and it did this, but it's all hinged on the content. But it's maybe there's bigger design principles involved in here. But when you have the epiphany, the emotional response is what helps with teachers, or leaders will say buy-in, like, I want teacher buy-in. Like, I've been helping teachers with the chaotic classroom and the thinking classroom. I'm helping teachers with problem-based learning, where they're, getting more engagement and turning talks. Like, the research is there, folks. Like, we got 8 effective teaching practices that say, we want productive discourse. We want to move, towards procedural fluency, but from conceptual understanding. We want to make sure that we're internalizing problem solving as a major focus. Like, it's all there. It's been there for 14, 15 years now. Like, but it's the personal epiphanies that we have because of experiences that react to our emotions that actually cause us to make shifts in our instruction. So part of those shifts are like, yes, I had an emotional response to an instructional routine, but I also probably need to have emotional responses to the mathematics I'm learning, so I feel comfortable there. And like, that's the crux here when you think about it, is that if I'm resistant because I don't want to teach a chaotic classroom. I haven't had that emotional response to both the mathematics, because I want kids to learn it that way and understand it that way, because I had this realization, this math epiphany that I didn't know before, and I need to convey that to my students. And I also have that emotional response to the instructional routine. I'd be like, oh my gosh, I communicated the learning goal in the same time period, and it was deeper. Those two things have to be addressed when you're helping teachers. And yourself as a teacher, you need to create either that experience for yourself or take a risk to try to do that. Like, think about it. Like, if that's what you really want, you got to make that happen for yourself if you're not getting it from somewhere else. But if I'm leading teachers, I want to design with those design principles in mind, because otherwise I'm not, creating a shift in instruction or shift in practice because I'm addressing, the data says so. Well, so what? Make it applicable and hit home with the emotion.
Yeah, and I kind of want to just speak to the administrators who might be listening. How can you support teachers in making this shift? Because, as Kyle mentioned early on in the podcast here, that, sometimes teachers are afraid to let that control go in the classroom because the administrator is going to walk in and say it was noisy, right? And so what can administrators or evaluators do that are going to support that and help teachers make that shift and take those risks? Well, one thing is I would highly encourage any administrator or evaluator who's popping into a math classroom where maybe a thinking classroom model is going on there, is to not just sit in the back of the room and take notes, to engage with the students, ask them questions, listen to the conversations, because I think that's when we're going to see that by allowing students to think through a problem with a thought partner at a board, there's a lot of math actually going on that's wouldn't be seen. You wouldn't catch it if you were just sitting in the back of the room. So engaging with students, asking questions, maybe staying for the consolidation piece of the lesson just to see how the teacher brings them back together and how that learning is actually consolidated in a lesson. So not just being a quick pop in and noticing compliance, right? It's like, what are you looking for when you walk into a math classroom? Are we looking for compliance, or are we looking for mathematical thinking and problem solving going on? And so, thinking about that, and that gets to just what, like John was saying, you have to know the math, right? So even as an administrator, if you are supporting your teachers, you have to understand the math that you're supporting so that you can see that when you walk into a classroom and recognize that.
I love it. I love it. And, oftentimes too, like John, you had mentioned earlier in the episode, as you're walking down the hall and it pretty quickly, like you can hear the difference between productive chaos and like unproductive chaos, right? And I think obviously the more you walk around in the room, so the suggestion from Beth, like if you're an administrator just walking into the classroom, like walking around and listening, and the same has to be happening for the teacher, the facilitator. You need to be walking around and listening in on what's going on. And we want to keep things productive. And when things become unproductive is when we need to actually have, and this is kind of a tip that we want to share as we go here, we want to have a structure in place for how students know that we're going to bring it back together. So whether you do, I stole the Dan Meyer 1, 2, 3 clap, everyone claps at once. That was kind of a thing that I used. So kids knew, and this is the same when we do PD with educators, like it's going to get loud. So how am I going to bring this back? And like that, if that's your fear, you have to go, okay, how do I bring this back so that we can recalibrate and we can make sure that everybody's on track and that we're staying productive and that we need to do. And then sometimes in some moments, like maybe today, we need to like bring it back together to like a more teacher facilitated moment in time right now, right? In order to recalibrate and get things going. So this isn't an all in or an all out deal. We want to make sure that ahead of time, before we go get students working and collaborating, that we've actually helped them with classroom management skills and routines that they know what comes next. I'm going to use Jim Strachan's move. Whenever he has someone turn and talk, like he usually brings, if it's in person, he brings a little chime, and he's got chimes and he just slowly hits the chimes, like completely opposite of my move. My move's like 1, 2, 3.
I want to be louder than
loud. Everything's great. Like he's just nice and calm with the chimes.
That's
like
Jim though.
Everyone's different and everyone has a different style. But I think one of the key pieces is you have to really think this through and go, okay, before I'm going to quote unquote unleash and give up all of this control, I need to know what's going to be my tool, what's going to be the routine, what's the expectation for my students in order to bring them back. And oftentimes, and I know Yvette used to do this with her students first week of school, like they would practice these things. Like, if you want them to come to a corner of the room for consolidation, it's like you might have to actually practice getting up, coming over here. And like, I want this to be done in 45 seconds. So that means like, hey, on the way there, you're allowed to talk, you're allowed to this, you're allowed to that. You can do all these things. But when we get to that part of the room, I want to know that everyone's ready to go and what's going to be the signal, and make sure that people are on the same, on the same path. Because if we don't set these structures, we're actually setting ourselves up for a really hard or rocky start to this journey, because the students aren't sure what to do. You're not sure what to do. And then that may lead to some unnecessary issues in terms of trying to feel whether this is a effective way to teach mathematics, or maybe it's an ineffective way to teach mathematics. So just making sure that you've kind of thought that through, you've done some of this quote unquote practice, however you choose to do it, in order to and I would say be very transparent with the students too, and say like, this is new for me. Like, this is new for me, and we're going to do this together. We're going to learn how to do this together. Sometimes I think we try to, fake it till we make it. And it's like, it's very easy for people to pick up on that. So like, work together with your students so that most students are going to be open to this idea that they're going, wow, like you're saying, I don't have to sit there listening to you for 45 minutes straight. We actually get to collaborate and talk to our, our neighbors and things like that. Let's make sure that they're a part of that process so we can figure out like what's working and what's not, because sometimes students will come up with some great moves and great ideas and norms that you can introduce into your math classroom so that it is more collaborative and a much, we'll call it, organized chaos is probably the word we're after here, right? We want to make sure that everybody's a part of it and that there's a lot of learning going on.
Yeah, like what we're talking about is normalizing that that's what your class could look like. But we're also, the three of us and people who are listening are also, I think, they know what this looks like. Like there's coherence here between the three of us, that we could describe what that classroom looks like, sounds like, and supposed to look like and sound like you said, Kyle, it's like, productive, versus unproductive when you walk down the hall. But not everybody knows that. And I think sometimes we take for granted who knows that and who doesn't know that. So for example, let's say you're now a coach, you're a coordinator, you're supporting a teacher. You might assume that they know what that looks like because you say productive struggle, but they don't. They don't know what that's supposed to look like in their classroom. All they think is chaos. They haven't seen it. They haven't seen it in action. They haven't seen a good example of it. They just heard terms describe it. Same with your administrator. If you're asking, like Beth, you were saying, let's invite the administrator in to see what this is supposed to look like. But the administrator might not know what it's supposed to look like either. Like, have they had been, targeted for support and coaching around this instructional vision of what we're trying to achieve in our classrooms? And this is this coherence idea. It's a really important idea that needs to spread across the system. Like, teachers need to know what that's supposed to look like if we're focusing on it as a major component of the work that we want to see in our classrooms. Like, does the administrator know that that's what we're all trying to strive for? Does the coach, are they supporting that? And are we providing opportunities for everyone to see it in action and experience it and have support along with it? Are our PD Day sessions that we hold a couple times a year, are they geared towards this? Our senior administration at the district level, our coordinators, do they understand that this is what it's supposed to look like and sound like? This is a coherence problem sometimes when we have resistance at the school level, is we just don't know what this is supposed to look like. We all think it's different. We're all talking different. We're all seeing different pictures when we're using the same language. And so your moves are to say, if I'm going to be walking through with the principal, it's like, let's make sure they call it out and what this is supposed to look like and what it's not supposed to look like. We have to make sure there's targeted support in that area. Like, you have to create the coherence. You have to say, like, these are the descriptors of what productive disposition looks like. This is what productive struggle should look like. Make it clear across your system what it looks like and sound like. Like we got a district right now that's like their main priority is they realize that they don't have coherence here. And so they're creating artifacts, videos, articles, support resources, priority classrooms, like bright spot classrooms where teachers can walk through and have, say, what this looks like. Videos of other teachers who are replicating this type of routine so that they can create coherence across the system. That they're creating like this codex of support that people can go to say that's what it's supposed to look like and that's not what it's supposed to look like. Like that's an important component if you're actually going to create, say, shift in a classroom instruction. There's a lot of times when you think about it, we started here with a teacher who's like, it's chaos, but it comes down to coherence. It's like you just don't know what you don't know yet. So, when we talked a lot about, so a few different things from a teacher's perspective, from a leader's perspective, from an administrator's perspective, important ideas to consider. It's hard, this is the job, is we have hard jobs, no matter what level we're at and what role we're at. So it's hard work. If you are interested in creating coherence in your school or your school district or your system, we've put together a tool that our teams that we support here at Make Math Moments typically use and have used with some success. We call it the Coherence Compass, the Math Coherence Compass. It's a tool, it's a template that can help create coherence across a system because it helps align your one objective that you're focused on for the next few years. What is that one thing that we're striving to shift? How does that support our vision? That's part of the compass. How do we use our subsystems of support? What are our strategic strengths that we could make use of to support that goal and support that vision? That's part of the compass. And then what are our core beliefs and our core values? What do we believe about student learning? Are we making sure that when you use the compass, when you have instructional decisions like supporting a teacher at a school, like putting professional development into place, like a PLC is coming up, like a PD day is coming up, I'm not sure what to do, it helps answer these types of questions. Like whatever I do, does it pass all 4 points on the compass, north, south, east, west? Can I actually support it because I actually have the subsystems of support to support ongoing professional development in that area? Does it support our 5-year mission, our 5-year objective? Does it support the vision we see in our classrooms for instructional experience for students? Does it support what we truly believe about how students learn math and how teachers learn? These are the things that you want to continually ask yourself, and that's what that coherence compass does. It helps you get clear on that and helps you make everyone else clear on that, because all of a sudden a principal has the compass in front of them. They ask themselves the same questions, and it becomes a piece that is the through line from district office down to the classroom. You can get a copy of the compass, see a training of the compass, get a template of the compass, see examples of the compass. Head on over to makemathmoments.com/coherence. You can download a copy and put it to use.